Hello all, and thank you for the rest that joining. Also, warm welcome to all of you. Um, let's say we've got a few attendees online already. Let's get started. So I'd like to welcome you to our today's webinar, CIS Governance and How to Build Consistent and Successful Experience Programs. My name is Diana Tuskiewicz. I'm going to be your host today. And I'm going to introduce Derek, who's with me online in a minute as well. Just a bit of housekeeping before we go into the session. This webinar will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. And also you're going to have a chance to answer questions or ask questions through the Q&A window on your screen. And we will take some time at the end of the webinar to kind of run through these questions and answer them. So now I'm pleased to introduce Derek to you. Derek is our Director of Consulting at InMoment and advises regional and international companies from various industries, including B2B, healthcare, telecoms, financial services on the topic of customer experience. In his many years of experience, he's had friends implement and scale their programs globally. And with that, he will now share with us some new approaches from his wealth of experience. So with that, Derek, over to you.
Diana, thank you for that introduction and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Governance is a really important topic that we've seen grow in terms of priority in recent times. So I've been around in this game for nearly 30 years, and what we've seen recently is as programs have scaled and become more complex, then the issue of actually managing and governing these programs to success has become more of a challenge and an opportunity. And it's increasingly what I spend my time on and my colleagues in the EMEA consulting team, with many of you on this call, to be fair, and others. So we're very excited to share with you our latest learnings and tips and tricks so that we can hopefully get the most success going forward. So let's start with an introduction. Just, I'm sure I'm pushing on an open door here with you, but just to set the scene for the conversation to come on this webinar. When we get really good governance in place, and we see this on the programs that are really running well, everyone's on side. The benefits of the program are clearly articulated. There's excitement and engagement with the program at all levels. And that's crucial, really, because clearly we need to operationalize the improvements from programs. We can only do that if everyone's on side with what we're trying to achieve, gets it, and jumps in and gets involved. So that's one of the benefits of governance. The other thing is, once we've got that alignment around the direction of travel, then it's so much easier to scale programs, to roll them out to new business units, to bring the digital team in if they're not already, to go into another market, and so on and so forth. If we've got the governance right, everyone's being consulted right through, then those extensions of the program are so much easier. And also, if we're making the right decisions using the right people and listening to the business and leveraging all the knowledge we have, then we have a best practice aligned program, which at the same time as being aligned with industry best practices is shaped around the specific needs of the client organization. And if we get all those things in the right place, that generally means we've got good governance. And just to sort of flag up some of the challenges that we do see, and to be fair, some of the programs that we're asked to take over and relaunch is often that process of bringing InMoment in as the new partner. We can often see the trigger being some of these failings, which governance can solve. So, there may not be a direct line into the ELT goals and what the CEO is trying to achieve. There may be a bit of a broken connection between what the program's seeking to achieve and what the CEO is prioritizing. So we need to re-establish that link. There may be some confusion about who's in charge, who owns this, who's making the decisions, how are they made. And that can lead to some criticisms of programs, of legacy programs that we take on, where, you know, maybe the KPI isn't relevant for that particular business unit, and we may get into conversations about NPS, customer effort score, and all of those wonderful conversations. There may be a customer touch point that isn't being effectively listened to because it hasn't been designed in to the overall architecture. And also there may be confusion about who actually is responsible for taking the action to fix these customer pain points. There may be responsibility split between different teams, again, because the right governance isn't in place to ensure there's that smooth, friction-free process between customer listening, understanding and interpreting, taking the actions, improving the experience for the customer, and delivering those business outcomes. So these are some of the challenges that will be addressed by really good governance. So where do we get to once we've got the right processes in place? We get full alignment, we get everyone in the tent who needs to be, we get a program that reaches out and listens to everyone's needs and addresses and accommodates those within an overall common core of a program. We get a frontline that knows what they're doing and is supported to take the actions that we're asking that they do, and also change management. And I'll just share with you one story briefly from a retailer we work with, which we did some stakeholder depth interviews just to sort of reset and relaunch the program because there were some governance issues that predated us taking over the program. And one of the senior stakeholders said to me, I've worked really hard with my team and I've set them a target to fix a particular customer pain point, and I've identified a metric which is going to indicate progress on that issue. That metric was removed from the survey without consulting me, and it's just really taken the wind out of my sails. And that is a classic example of effective change, transparent, open change management, where everyone affected by a change is involved in that decision, obviously within an efficient process, but that's an example of what can go wrong. So I won't read out all of these, but this is why governance is important, because these are the outcomes that really good governance will deliver for us. So how do we get great governance, I hear you ask? Well, that's the next section. So top tips. We would do stakeholder audits. We'd recommend those at the start of a journey in terms of, we're going to reset this program. We may even be starting our first ever experience improvement program. By the way, we use the term experience improvement because, as I'm sure we're all aware, nowadays we're in the spotlight in this industry. We have to deliver tangible improvement to the business through the actions we're taking in the program that we're running. So it's really important that we don't talk about measurement here, we talk about improvement. That's why we use the term XI at InMoment. So there may be a program being built for the first time, there may have been local programs being brought into a global one, there may be a reset, there may be a relaunch, whatever it is. If we're at a kind of fork in the road, that's a great opportunity to reach out to stakeholders and listen to them and ensure that they're in the tent on the journey that we're embarking on, that we are serving them, we're feeding them with the data that they need, we're helping and enable and activating the program for them so that they can achieve their goals, and we're working with the grain of the company to get things done and actions taken. So stakeholder audits are a really, really important and useful thing, which we would recommend you do periodically through the life cycle of an XI program. Now, the next thing is the governance structure. You need to set up a governance architecture in terms of a HQ body of people with ELT sponsorship who will be empowered to run the program and make sure it delivers for the business. Now, in organizations that are global or span different business units, that structure will be mirrored at the local unit or geographic level, so that you have governance boards running elements of the program that they own and are responsible for, but it all ladders up to overall management of the global program at the HQ level. It's really important that you get the right people into that board, that you are inclusive in your approach so that nobody gets left behind, and we are making sure that we're running this as an operationalized global program. Now, out of that comes the blueprint for the program and clarity around what is the common core. Typically, we see an 80-20 rule operating, whereby the XI program globally is defined in terms of 80% of its specification, in terms of the sampling, which surveys we're running. Are we doing an annual relationship survey every 6 months? Which touch points do we do that through a digital intercept method, through email to web, whatever else we do? So the specification, the functional specification, the SLAs around the closed loop and those kind of things, 80% of that typically is defined at the global level, which allows for that 20% localization where business units are materially different or geographies, and that ensures buy-in and that the program will fit the needs of all the stakeholders so that we take everyone with us on the journey. So I've mentioned this before. What does it look like in practice? Well, you know, we've got one client that has it's a huge automotive group, and they have a monthly what they call customer table. At the customer table, sometimes the CEO actually drops into that, but even without CEO involvement, it is very high profile. And the challenge to all those present who run all the different parts of the business, the sales process, the different brand owners, the after sales, and so on and so forth, is to ask each member at the customer table on a monthly basis, where's the customer? What are they telling us? Are they happy? Are there any pain points out there? What are you doing about them? And that is the discipline that we have on a monthly basis, so that we get into a nice cadence of people understanding all the feedback that we're getting from all the different sources, interpreting it, finding the news in there in terms of what needs to be fixed, and then having actions that they can share with the group and get support from other stakeholders as well. And that's the kind of rhythm that drives continuous improvement, that is tangible and that is communicated up to the board. And it also services any blockers so that they can be addressed so that we don't get any drift. And that's a nice kind of rhythm, but it only works if this is baked into the BAU, if this is how we roll, this is what we do as a business. We have this monthly cadence, everyone knows who's responsible for what, and it becomes ingrained in the culture of the organization. Now, I would also talk about the other elements to this. I've got another client, an insurance client, that has tactical working groups who pick up the actions identified and signed off within the XI board. So in that case, there may be something around the claims process which we've identified we need to get on top of. A tactical working group will be recruited with members from in and outside the XI board to fix that with a timeline. You know, come back to us next month, tell me what you've done, tell us what you've done, tell us how it's going. And that is a nice agile way of working. The tactical working groups will be stood down once the action is delivered and the improvement has been seen. So I like that model, and that seems to work very well. The other part of this is the notion of influencers. And every organization I've ever engaged with does have their rising stars, people that everyone's looking to, listening to, you know, and sort of maybe following in terms of the direction of travel and so on. So get those people involved, identify them, bring them in, have them as a guest speaker. And the same goes for the frontline as well. We want the frontline to be telling customers, this program that we're running is really exciting. Please do give us your feedback, because it benefits you, it benefits me. If there's any sense of the frontline being resistant to this for whatever reason, you know, maybe slightly nervous about what the customer might say, all those kind of challenges, let's have those conversations. Let's engage the frontline and make sure they get the benefit of what we're doing, so that they can encourage customers who they deal with every day to take part and provide feedback. And again, little tricks like just customer wows, which I'm going to come on to later, to get them excited and thank them for what they're doing. And also, again, bring them in, involve them in maybe a customer journey mapping workshop or whatever you're doing, so that they feel they have a stake in the program. So let's now move on to governance in action and what it looks like. So Allianz, very, very proud to work with Allianz, or certainly one of the largest insurers in the world. And the reason that the XI program that we run for them has now scaled successfully at the last count to 37 markets and across 3 lines of business is in large part due to the governance that they have, which is really, really good and is best practice. What they did when they reset the program and energize themselves for this global rollout of a consistent VOC program is, and I could tell this story through half an hour webinar on its own, but I'll just keep it brief for now. So what we have is a governance process which involved and listened and involved everyone who needed to be involved. So we had days of workshops in Munich with people from different business units and different countries and geographies. We listened to them, we heard what they wanted the VOC to achieve, any differences they had, and from those discussions, we identified the enablement and activation support we were going to need to deliver. And we also were able to factor in their specific needs to make sure that the Common Core blueprint was fit for purpose. It was aligned with best practice based on our guidance, but at the same time, it fitted the business and had sufficient flex to serve the needs of all the participants. So a really big engagement up front to set this up right, but it's been rewarded by the scale and speed of the rollout and the consistency we have. So once we get into BAU for programs, and I'm sure many of you will say, yeah, we've been running programs for some time. This is the agenda for governance. In simple terms, this is what we see. Roadmap. Okay, every XI program must have momentum because technology is improving. Approaches that work are coming through all the time. That's what makes it so exciting for us and you to work in this fast developing space. So we must have an XI program that has a roadmap, a vision, a 1, 2, 3 year plan. The governance board owns that. Okay, so that's the first agenda item typically in a monthly governance meeting. Okay, what are we doing in the next? Are we on track? Are we launching these extra bits and pieces, and so on and so forth? So that's the roadmap one. Engagement. Sometimes, I have to say, sometimes we see a lot of above the line and below the line engagement campaigns when we're resetting or launching a program. It's important that you maintain that momentum, keep all of this front of mind through an ongoing engagement campaign. So we have one client who hopefully on this call where we launched the program with a video from the CEO, which was really impactful, just setting out why we're doing this, what it is, why it benefits everyone inside the organization and within the customers to take part. Now, we hope that will be repeated by another video to show all the actions that we've taken and the improvements that we're seeing and why our client is the most customer-centric organization in the sector. It's about that constant reinforcement of the excitement and benefit of the program over time. So that's a marketing piece. So you do need the Marcoms people involved to manage that and run it like a campaign. And then the actions, again, be smart. Is in a loop operating as efficiently? Are any cases being triggered that are not being actioned? Are any cases being actioned but we're not managing to turn them round? Do we have any other treatments that we could bring to bear which would give us a better outcome? Have we got the right resource in place and so on? Outer loop actions. We've got a bunch of things here that we could potentially be working on where we're getting slightly lower scores or we're behind a competitor which ones do we do first? Which ones do we do second? The Governance Council needs to own that and needs to drive and set those priorities and manage those actions through to successful outcomes. So those would typically be the 3 agenda items on the monthly XI board agenda. Change management, I mentioned before, so avoid that scenario that I picked up on a stakeholder interview with a leading retailer. So I'm not going to coach you all on change management because I'm sure you've done the training over the years, many of you, but just to put it in here as part, a really important part of the responsibility of the governance board. Really important to avoid situations, as I've mentioned, and to make sure the right decisions are being made in the right way, that there is transparency around that process, that it's explained why we're doing this, because we want everyone to be an advocate for this program. We don't want people feeling that they haven't been listened to or they don't understand why a change was made. They preferred it as it was before, and all of those things that can happen if you haven't got the right, inclusive, structured, transparent way to manage change. So a really important part of the responsibilities of the governance board. So I mentioned before about closed loop. Now I'm working with one client at the moment who we've just reset and relaunched a 6 survey program, and we're really keen in that program, as you should all be, on leveraging the power of inner loop, as Bain and Company call it. In other words, case management. When we have a customer who isn't happy and tells us so, we need to have a process for solving that problem, re-engaging with the customer and addressing whatever they're not happy about. Now, that is a whole art and science in and of itself, but it's important we get that right because it's one of the main ways that we deliver value through an XI program. So with this client that I've got a call tomorrow actually on this one, it's about volume and matching and prioritizing cases. So we're rolling out the program. We're seeing some, they're doing really well. It's a very strong brand, but as with any program, there are some detractors. So we need to understand what kind of detractors we're getting through, where do they go, how often, how long does it take to fix a case, what does that mean in terms of FTEs that we're going to need. So we need to plan this in. We don't want to turn a fire hose on and send it to a beleaguered single frontline bottleneck who hasn't got the resource or the skills to deal with it. We want the opposite of that. We want these being picked up by people who can and know what to do and can fix the problem so that we get momentum. And we need to forecast volumes and prioritize them. So that's the work we're doing. So again, that's another element of what you should be constantly reviewing through the lifetime of your program to make sure this process is running as efficiently as possible. Again, it's for the governance board to manage that at a holistic program-wide level. And then to outer loop, which is the actions that you take based on the aggregated feedback and the intelligence we get from that around systemic issues that we can really get to work on and grip. Now, action planning needs to be really efficient and agile in terms of understanding where there's an opportunity to improve, understanding what needs to be done, who's going to do it, how long is it going to take, and what's it going to cost, and what return are we going to get from that. Now, those considerations can sometimes lead to a little bit of paralysis, and therefore you need to bake that into the governance cadence so that we're rattling through these and making these decisions quickly, making the right calls, working in the right area where we're going to get the maximum return. Again, that should be baked into the governance that you run. Celebrate success. Don't use a program just to talk about customer pain points that we're fixing, important though that is. Celebrate we call them customer wows, get those out there so that people feel that this is understanding customers in the round, all warts and all, positive and negative, and people get excited. Everyone likes to be celebrated when they do good work, so let's make sure we do that. I mentioned about campaign. In the interest of time, I'm going to rattle through this fairly quickly, but they're just some tips as to how you structure an engagement campaign, which, as I mentioned before, needs to be continuous. Obviously, a bit of a spike around a launch and a relaunch, but we do like to see continuous reinforcement of what we're doing. And here's just some examples from various brands. We've got Waitrose, Tesco and Aldi. It's a bit UK centric, this, but it does, these are Honda actually is in there as well. There's some really fantastic examples, and we do urge the Governance Council to take this on, to find ways to energize the organization, to show what we're doing through the XI program, the exciting customer wows that are coming through, celebrating success, reinforcing the right behaviors. Let's be creative. I would just make one point, and I always make this whenever I'm in these kind of conversations. I love wow walls. I think it's great in supermarkets, in canteens, in shared areas, but there's always the danger that they're not up to date. So if you're going to do a wow wall, make sure someone's got the job of keeping it up to date and refreshing it over time. And that's why people sometimes switch to digital, so it's easier to do that. But some really great examples of the kind of stuff that gets done, Avis and budget in there as well. So that brings us to what does good look like? It looks like a really humming program that everyone's on side with, that delivers outcomes. Change management's efficient. It's well designed, it's well planned, everyone's enabled, and it's all activated. It's got a continuous evolution to harness the best of what's coming through, and it delivers ultimately tangible business success. That brings us to the end of the session. We've just got a few minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Derek, for running us through this deck today and through SIX governance. So, dear audience, if you've got any questions, you still have the chance to use the Q&A window. Just as mentioned, we'll be sharing the recording with you to kind of share with your wider network or just rewatch. And also we'll be sending out a mini survey at the end of this or later on today. So we'd love your feedback so we can improve on our webinars and the content we deliver to you. But with that, Derek, one question we received was, how do you actually start with SIX governance? Where do you begin?
Yeah, that's a fair question, given we've talked about quite a lot of things that the governance council, governance board, the customer table, however you want to call it, does. Yeah, I would say if you're starting out on this in terms of a new, start of a new journey, a relaunch, a reset, that kind of thing, I would go back to the one of the slides I had in here about stakeholder audit. Just let's start with the customers or the stakeholders of the program. Let's get out to all those people and understand what do they think, what are their main priorities. Is the current program serving them? Where are the opportunities for it to help more, drive, and help them achieve their goals? I would always start there and then go from that.
Great. And then one question that just came in: who's responsible to start the SIX governance?
Well, we always like to have a board level sponsor, and actually, I didn't mention the Allianz VOC example started with a very public endorsement from Oliver Barter, the CEO globally. So you do always need that. But actually, this is an interesting point. Some organizations we find are more top down, and so we add more weight to the ELT CEO message. And other organizations, I'm working with another client that actually has told us we're not top down. We've grown through acquisition. It's quite a lot of autonomy. And in that case, you'd want a more inclusive approach and to get endorsement from different levels of the organization. You'd always want both, but the balance between those two will reflect the culture of the organization.
Great, thank you. And that's all we have time for today, but as said, we'll be sharing the recording. If there's any more questions you have on this topic, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. As Derek said, there's so much more to cover, and I think was just the tip of the iceberg we kind of shared today. But thank you very much for joining today, and speak soon.